My blood tests were coming back better every month, and I was still waking up at 3 in the morning for no reason that I could find. Not occasionally, consistently, month after month of improving markers, and still this, completely wide awake in the early hours, staring at the ceiling. No idea why, if I'd fixed the things that were supposed to be broken, why was my sleep still behaving like I hadn't? I'm Neil. I've got 13 years of NHS blood data, and I tracked 57 nights of 9 out of 10 sleep in 2025, all of it without medication or melatonin. But it didn't arrive when my biomarkers improved. It arrived 6 months later. And if you're in that gap right now, numbers heading the right way, sleep still chaotic, the next 10 minutes might explain why. Because blood sugar instability runs a pattern at night that nobody warned me about, and it affects most people going through any kind of metabolic change. First, the mechanism. What blood sugar instability actually does between midnight and 4 in the morning, and why it produces a cortisol spike that looks exactly like insomnia, but isn't. Then my data, what the 6-month lag looked like in 13 years of NHS records, and the specific pattern that finally told me sleep was last in the repair sequence. Then what actually changed, not a supplement, not a sleep idea, not a bedroom routine, the thing that shifted and when. So here's the situation I was in. By mid-2024, the numbers were genuinely moving. HbA1c had dropped from 47, that's pre-diabetic, down to 40. Cholesterol was still high but trending. ALT, which had been elevated, coming back into range. My GP was pleased, I was pleased. On paper, the inputs were working. And then I'd wake up at 3:15, sometimes 4:15, completely alert, not groggy, not needing the bathroom, just wide awake, for no reason that I could name. I thought it was stress. Then I thought it was the room temperature. Then I decided it was probably just my age, and I'd have to live with it. I'd been assuming it was a sleep problem. It took me months to work out it wasn't a sleep problem at all. The thing I'd missed, and this is the pattern that I hadn't found, and nobody had flagged it for me, was that my blood sugar, even as it improved over months, was still doing something at night, something that my daytime readings weren't showing. And that nocturnal pattern had a very specific consequence at a very specific time, 3 in the morning, give or take. January 2024, HbA1c 43, still pre-diabetic range. This was before the dietary changes had fully compounded. I'd started the Boxing Day shift in late December 2023, so we're 5-6 weeks in at this point. Sleep was broken, 4-5 hours, waking constantly in the small hours. I wasn't tracking it formally yet, just noting it down. March 2024, HbA1c coming down. The dietary window had shifted. I'd stopped eating late evening meals, moved earlier. Midsummer is when that finally locked down for good, but the change started earlier in the year. And here's the thing, the HbA1c was improving faster than the sleep. That gap is the pattern. May 2024, blood sugar markers continuing to improve. Sleep still disrupted, still 3 a.m, awake. I'd go to bed fine, drop off without trouble, and then somewhere between 2:30, 2:45 and 4, I'd be completely awake, sometimes 40 minutes, sometimes 2 hours. What I didn't understand at the time, and this took me a while to piece together, is that HbA1c is a 3-month average. It tells you where blood sugar has been. It doesn't tell you what's happening at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday when your liver decides it needs to top up your glucose supply and overshoots. The nocturnal pattern works like this. Your blood sugar drops during the night. That's normal. You're fasted. That's what should happen. But if your system is still recalibrating, if insulin sensitivity is still improving, but not fully repaired, the overnight drop can go a bit further than intended. Your body reads that as a low fuel signal. It responds by releasing cortisol. Cortisol raises blood sugar. You wake up. In my case, it looked less like a sleep disorder and more like a fuel management problem wearing insomnia's coat. Think of it like a central heating thermostat that hadn't been recalibrated after you've properly insulated the house. The house is warmer now, the work is done, but the thermostat doesn't know that yet, so it keeps firing the boiler at 3 in the morning to hit a temperature the house doesn't need anymore. The system is improving. The controller is still running the old program. That's exactly what was happening to me. Now, the thing that made this click, I'd been tracking sleep quality scores informally alongside the blood markers, and I noticed, not immediately, I had to lay things out and look that the 3 a.m. waking was still present even on the best diet days, even when I'd eaten well, eaten early, done everything right. The sleep disruption was lagging behind the dietary changes by weeks and then actually by months. The second moment came later in 2024, 5 consecutive nights of 8.5 hours sleep. I felt rough, woke feeling like I'd barely slept. And the reason, once I'd thought it through, was timing. I'd gone to bed late, around 1, and woke naturally at 9:30. The hours were there, but the window was wrong. Cortisol and glucose start rising an hour or two before your body expects to wake. If your body expects to wake at 7, but you're still asleep at 9:30, that preparation process, the glucose mobilization, the cortisol lift, has been running for 2.5 hours into your sleep. You wake up feeling like you've been mildly stressed all night. Because you have. Duration isn't the whole story. The timing really does matter. 13 years of NHS blood tests, the actual numbers, the GP conversations, what changed and what didn't. If you want to follow someone who documents this properly rather than just talks about it, that's what this channel is. Subscribe if that's going to be useful to you. So the penny dropped, as these things tend to, while I was reading. I came across Jessie Inship, biochemist, wrote Glucose Revolution, and she helped me understand a possible pattern. If glucose rises and then drops during the night, the body may respond with a cortisol release. And that cortisol, in some people, is enough to produce a clean, wide-awake moment at 3 or 4 in the morning. Not a sleep disorder, a fuel management response. Later that day, it properly landed. The mechanism I'd been experiencing had a name, and more importantly, had a cause that was addressable. Not with a sleep supplement, not with a bedtime routine, but with what I was eating, and when I was eating it relative to sleep. The cortisol spike at 3 in the morning wasn't anxiety, it wasn't age, it wasn't insomnia. It was my body correcting a blood sugar dip. And the blood sugar dip was happening because my system, as it repaired, was still learning the new normal. What this suggested to me, and I want to be clear, this is N equals 1, one person, 13 years of data, make of that what you will, was that sleep isn't a parallel track, it's downstream. You fix the metabolic inputs and sleep repairs, but it repairs last. The blood tests improve first, the energy improves, the weight moves, and then eventually the sleep catches up. 6 months in my case, that's the gap I tracked. What I do differently, I track sleep timing alongside sleep duration from day 1, not just hours, when. The 5 nights of 8.5 hours that felt like nothing would have taught me the timing lesson 6 months earlier if I'd been logging the window rather than just the totals. Hours in isolation don't tell you enough. If your daytime markers are improving, but you're still waking consistently between 2 and 4, don't assume it's a separate problem. Check what you're eating in the 3 hours before bed. Check the timing of your last meal. In my case, moving my eating window earlier was the single change that shifted the pattern. Not dramatically, not overnight, but that's what moved it. If you're seeing this in your own data, it's worth raising with your GP. Your GP may recognise the cortisol and glucose pattern, and they can help you decide whether it fits your situation. This one's for the people who feel wrong but haven't got a label for it yet. If you're waking up at a specific time, 3, 3:30, 4, and it's consistent and you can't explain it, it might not be stress and it might not be your mattress. This kind of blood sugar and cortisol pattern may show up before anything is labelled clinically. Years before sometimes. It shows up in the sleep first. The daytime markers can look fine while this is happening at night. If that's you, just worth being curious about. Not a diagnosis, just a thing to track. Note what you ate and when for a week. See if there's a pattern. That's all I did. If you want to start tracking your own patterns, sleep timing, eating window, how they interact, I've got a free tracker template in the description. It's what I use to spot this. Nothing complicated, just a log. Links below and it's free. And everything here is educational, not medical advice. Speak to your GP before changing your fasting pattern, diet or medication.